The Germanium Pre and the Germanium line in general is a pretty special place for me, not only because of its sound, but it was actually the first units that I did that were completely my own design. We started doing the EMI units and came out with these after, and I really enjoyed being able to get creative with the circuits, pursue changes in sound, and I think it kind of reflects that. There's flexibility in it with the feedback controls. You can modify the character of the preamp to your wishes if you need it to be brighter or less bright or fuller sounding. It's very good at adapting to the situation. The feedback, generally speaking, when you have the feedback low, it's brighter. Going up here, it chills out the high ends a little bit. You get a very slight roll off on the highs. The harmonic content with the feedback high is much less. It's like thousands of times higher when you have it over on, say, in the 1 or 2 range. An important part of the Germanium preamp is the combination of these two controls. They interact with each other because they're in similar portions of the circuit, so changing one affects how the other acts. So a lot of times when you're using them, you will be changing both at the same time. I tend to have some pet settings, which is like I like the gain at 9 or 10 and the feedback, say, around 1 or 2. And then conversely, I like the gain down at 0 or 1 and then the feedback very high. They give you two pretty distinct different settings, brighter versus fuller. And then from there you will go in, you can adjust the thick, the pad, to how much you're driving the preamp, which is an important part of the unit. You can get a lot of different sounds out of it by adjusting those. The thick is a really interesting feature. It actually interacts with the impedance of the preamp, and it is sort of an EQ circuit, but a very simple one, and it kind of resonates with how the impedance is set, and it's a very interesting part of it. It's a very deep, full sounding EQ. Most people are surprised how deep it can get, but very useful on a lot of things. I've used it on drums, of course, guitars, even vocals in some cases, because it adds a nice warmth to the sound. Combining that with how you're driving the preamp, adding the thick in there, can be some really nice combinations. The overall sound of the preamp, it's a warm, full sound in general. Tends to be less bright than a lot of other discrete units. It's almost tube-like. Germanium transistors came out right after tubes when they were starting to work into transistors, and then later came silicon, which another different sound altogether. I think the germanium transistors tend to sound and sometimes function more like tubes than silicon transistors. So it's a really nice offering if you want something a little bit different than a standard discrete or IC preamp or a full-on tube unit. I think that's why it's been very successful for us. A different type of sound than most people are used to, and then the flexibility of options like the feedback and driving the unit. One thing that people are surprised about this unit is the DI, actually. It's probably my favorite DI of all of our units. It's a very full DI. You can get some pretty excellent bass sounds with it. Doing things to keyboards to liven them up, give them more character. Driving the preamp on those types of 1/4-inch sources, very effective. Something you should try if you have one and you haven't.